Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. It is Saturday, October 19th. Today we're going to do something a little different. We're going to look at the Chicago Sports Week as a whole, kind of go over a little bit of everything that's going on in the city of Chicago. Today we kind of have an off day. We don't really have a lot going on other than a Blackhawks game later tonight. So let's kind of go over a little bit of everything that's going on. So we will start off with the Chicago Cubs today. Looking at the Cubs situation into the offseason. Obviously, you know, the official offseason doesn't really start until, 4 or 5 days after the World Series ends. But there's already quite a bit of movement going on with the Cubs. They got rid of their first base coach and their third base coach, which would be Napoli at first and Harris at third. I believe a couple of trainers were let go as well. I know that Council is starting to get into a position where he's starting to bring in his own guys, which I thought that would have happened after at the beginning of last year when he got signed. Obviously, that did not happen, which I understand. To my understanding, it was kind of a situation where Council was kind of seeing what he was walking into and what he could do with the coaches that he had, which is understandable. He was walking into a situation where the Cubs improved and they were expected to improve into this season, and they wound up the same. I think they wound up with the exact same record. I mean, you had a record of 83 and 79. You tied for second with the Cardinals. So, I mean, you basically wound up sitting the same. But one of the biggest stories that I've seen in the last day is that the Cubs are linked to a very interesting player. The Chicago Cubs could be linked to Willy Adames because of Craig Counsell, and if this is the case, this could be a really good pickup for the Cubs because there's a lot of rumors floating around that you're looking to trade Nico Hoerner, although I don't know how that would work because I think Nico Hoerner's contract and Ian Happ's contract are pretty much exactly the same. I think there's no trade clauses in there. I don't know what teams the no trade clauses are for, but I'm almost positive that he's got no trade clauses in his contract. However, what do you do with Dansby Swanson? Well, looking at this report, which may or may not be true, that would involve Dansby Swanson shifting over to second base. Now, I think that Willy Adames should be played at second base because I mean he has filled in at second base a few times for the Brewers. I think that he would be a better fit at second base than Dansby Swanson, but either way, the thing is that you're looking at getting a guy that accounts for 30 home runs plus per season. I mean, that's the kind of offensive production slug that you're looking for. And I could see him landing with the Cubs simply just because of Craig Counsell. And if that's the case, I honestly would be more than delighted to bring Willy Adames on, whether that be him playing at second or that would be Dansby Swanson playing at second. I'd be fine either way with that because I mean you're looking to add slug, and I mean, you know, if Bellinger comes back, you would expect him to kind of bounce back into that 2023 season that he had where he's slugging a bit more. I know that he had 2 injuries this year that kind of plagued him and kept him out for a little bit. But I mean, you got Seiya Suzuki going into the last year of his contract. His slug is expected to still go up a little bit over this year. And then you're also looking at, Michael Busch at first base. How much does he progress over his first year? He was way better than I expected him to be playing first base. I didn't expect him to play the way that he did, both defensively and offensively. I mean, for a long time, he was making a very strong case to be a Gold Glover at first base. He made a really good case for being a defensive rookie of the year in the league. And I mean, that plug-in helped you a lot because you had a really big hole at first base. It was kind of a carousel of players since Rizzo left. And, with Michael Bush coming in and just doing what he did, I mean, that was outstanding. And I mean, you also got a hold of Mike Tauchman for another year, I believe. So I mean, your outfield is pretty set. But I mean, if you could get someone like Adames in, I mean that would be incredible for the offensive production of the team. Because the Cubs, while they did start off a lot better than they did last year, the problem that they ran into is that they had those 2 months where they had like no offensive production, right? And that offensive production picked back up. But I mean, you still want, if the Cubs in 2025 have that same kind of problem, you want a player that could produce through that to try to help you get through that. And I think Adames would be fantastic for that. And now that, Isaac Paredes has half of a year in Chicago, that nice new scenery, jitters, if you will, is kind of out of there. So I feel like he could pick up his offensive production quite a bit next year. I feel like he would be a better third baseman than this year, just because now he's acquainted with the team, he's acquainted with the playing style, he's acquainted with Chicago and Wrigley and how that plays. So I think that he would progress. And then you also have Miguel Amaya at catcher, who, I mean, he vamped up so much at the tail end of 2024. I mean, you're looking at a guy who could potentially be your main starter, and then you're looking at just going to get a solid backup to him. I mean, the way that he calls games, the way that he calls games is so. I mean, he streamlines it between every pitcher, which is kind of crazy to think about because each pitcher is so different, right? And he understands how different they are, and he tries to understand what he could do similarly between each of his pitchers, and it helps him because, I mean, we saw it with Wilson Contreras. Contreras tried to call drastically different games depending on who he was with. And I mean, his ERA starting compared to Gomes with the same pitcher was drastically different, right? And, I think that Miguel Amaya, his growth in 2024 could be definitely expanded in 2025. And I hope that he has, a breakout season because I feel like it's more than deserved. I think if he got a little bit more playing time this year over Betancourt and Gomes at the beginning of the year when he had him, I 100% believe that he could have had that breakout year this year. He just didn't have enough playing time to get there, which is okay. I hope that he has the 2025 that he rightfully deserves because he showed that he could definitely be the Cubs' main backstop. I mean, he's got it, and his pickoff attempts to first or to third or to second on a steal did get quite a bit better at the tail end of the year. He wasn't throwing balls into the outfield, and I mean, sure, not all of them were outs, but he was getting the ball to second base quicker, and so that growth too definitely helps. And then let's talk about Pete Crow-Armstrong. He's your starting center fielder in 2025. I think that Bellinger, if he opts in, goes to right field, and Suzuki's probably going to be your dominant DH there. But I mean, Pete Crow-Armstrong. I mean, his fielding has been A grade all year, very minimal mistakes. And then at the tail end of the year, kind of just like Amaya, his offensive production just skyrocketed. I mean, he was hitting balls left and right. He got a couple home runs in there. He was smashing doubles and triples at ballparks where triples even rarely happen. I mean, he's just so fast, and his base running is so smart. So smart. I mean, at the beginning of the year, he was getting cut down a bit because he was trying to get too greedy, but at the tail end of the year, he got a lot smarter with some of his base running, and I think that 2025 should be a breakout year for him as well. I think that he's making a case that he 100% should be a Gold Glover next year, no question about it. I think that if he was the dominant center field starter this year, he probably could have been in the Gold Glove conversation. But obviously you had Bellinger and Tauchman also policing center field, so I think that 2025 is going to be a nice breakout year for him, along with Miguel Amaya, defensively and offensively. So I think that 2025 the Cubs are kind of looking good on the offense and defensive side, given the growth of the players that needed to grow at the end of 2024. And then you got Cody Bellinger. So with Cody Bellinger, the big question is opt in or opt out. And, during the press conference at the end of the year, Jed Hoyer had said that, if he had a good year, he's going to have options. Along with a lot of other people, that's him basically telling Cody Bellinger to opt out, go somewhere else. Because, I think that the Cubs are going to put their money where their mouth is on Pete Crow Armstrong. Which would probably mean that Tauchman would be your starting right fielder, and you would use Suzuki as a DH, which I would also be okay with. But, you signed Cody Bellinger to this 3-year deal, and I believe there was also contract incentives in there for him to be able to even opt out. I don't know. He must have hit those metrics if Jed Hoyer's talking about it. I don't know what those metrics are. I don't have the contract in front of me. But, I personally would like to see Cody Bellinger, I would like to see Cody Bellinger opt in. I would like to see him another year. Yes, it was a down year offensively for him, but I feel like he would bounce right back to that 2022 esque of play, if you will. So, there's a lot going on around that, and we're not going to know a whole lot until after the World Series, because like I said, that off season officially begins like 4 or 5 days after the World Series. So, we won't get any news on that front for a while, which, that's okay too. I hope that Cody Bellinger sticks around through the rest of his contract, especially if Counsell is going to try to get Jed Hoyer to go after a guy like Adames. I think that the Cubs can set themselves up pretty damn good that way. And then, the big thing going into the offseason is your bullpen. You got to get some bullpen help. I know that you had guys like Porter Hodge that really came on at the end of the year, and you have a couple more guys that really held their own. But you can't be going in to all these 1-run games and be worried about if the bullpen can hold that 1-run game, right? Especially, when you have that blank in the middle of the season when you have no offensive production. You need that bullpen to be able to hold those 2-3-run games. And, some guys were a disappointment. Hector Neris didn't work out. We thought that, Alzolay was going to be a lockdown closer because of how he performed last year. Come to find out that he was dealing with an injury that wound up sidelining him for 2/3 of the season, which rightfully so. He shouldn't have played through the injury to begin with, and then you also had guys that were back and forth, like Kyle Hendricks. He had really good games, he had really bad games, and then at the end of the year, I feel like towards the end of the year, we saw vintage 2016 Kyle. But you can make the argument that you have your superstars in the field and in the lineup. Other than your 2 starting pitchers of Shota Imanaga and Justin Steele, I don't think you can make an argument that you have a star in your bullpen. I don't think that you can make that argument right now. And you need at least 1 star in your bullpen to be decent. And then you just need the rest of them to kind of hold their own. Granted, you also had a lot of injuries. You had a lot of people coming up from AAA. You had a lot to deal with this year. But at the same time, that's not really an excuse. We've been asking for bullpen help for 3 seasons now. And I know that Jed Hoyer has been a magician in getting bullpen talent and then using those as trade chips. So we saw that in 2021. We saw it in 2022. We even saw it a little bit in 2023. But last year, they kind of had all their eggs in one basket, and they thought that the bullpen was going to be fine, and that turned out not to be the case. So you definitely need to answer that bullpen call for help big time. I think that your starting rotation, as it sits right now, is more than serviceable, just because if you can get the same production out of Imanaga, you're going to be fine. You're expecting the same out of Justin Steele. So, your third could be Assad, and leave that 4th slot open, maybe as a rotation. I'm not exactly sure how you would want to go about that, but I don't think that I didn't think at any point during 2024 that starting pitching was really your main problem whatsoever. I more or less thought that it was the bullpen that was not helping, and then again you had that blank in the offense for 2 months, which was very uncharacteristic of a lot of players. But I mean, it happens sometimes, and it's just unfortunate that it happened for a period of 2 months for the Cubs, because if you only cut that down to a month, you're in the postseason right now. So, well, maybe not right now because we're already at the NLCS, but you're in on a wild card if you can cut that 2 month lull in production down to a month. You would have been better off. So, with that, I think that the Cubs questions are very obvious. You need that bullpen help. If the Adames rumors are true and the Cubs are going after him, I would love to see it. I'd love to see Bellinger back. And I hope that Craig Counsell goes and gets some coaches that he trusts at first and third base, and some trainers too, because I think some injuries definitely went a little bit longer than they needed to. So I think that having some better trainers would help with that. I never particularly had a problem with either Harris or Napoli, but obviously, Council's trying to build his culture, not extend on Ross's culture, so I also understand that. And with that being said, I'm going to move on over to the Bulls. To be honest, not that much of a basketball guy, but we are talking about Chicago sports. So, one quick thing. I don't like the White Sox either, me personally. I'm a North Side fan, even though I was born on the South Side. Rumors are floating. There's reports on it that Jerry Reinsdorf is looking to sell the White Sox. For the love of everything holy, for my family that is on the South Side, for my friends on the South Side, I hope you guys get that wish granted. I want to see the White Sox competitive just as much as anyone. I'm not one of those Cubs fans that absolutely hates the White Sox just because. I'm just not really a fan of them. I don't really follow them. Mainly because they're such a bad team. If they were a better team, I'd probably follow them quite a bit more, if I was being honest. And, I mean, come on, it would be Chicago's dream to see a Crosstown Classic World Series. I mean, New York is staring down that barrel right now. So, yeah, I mean, if the White Sox did better, I'd probably pay a little bit closer attention. But that being said, I surely hope that Reinsdorf sells the White Sox for you guys, because you all deserve better. 100%. You guys deserve better. That is a poverty franchise, poverty owner. You guys deserve it. Now, I'm just going to quickly touch on the Bulls. Not really that big into basketball. My brother knows everything about basketball. He could tell you any stat in his sleep if he really wanted to, but I'm not my brother. So, the big focus that I just wanted to touch on was the Bulls looking to get Lonzo Ball back. He checked into his first NBA game in over 2.5 years. He was limited to 15 minutes, however, finished with 10 points on 4 of 6 shooting from the field in Chicago's 125-123 preseason victory against Minnesota. From what my brother tells me, he is a big difference maker on the Bulls offense, so I really hope that shakes out. I know that for as much as I don't follow basketball, I know that was a really big blow. I think that a couple of guys left Chicago because he wasn't around, which, hey, fine. But, the Bulls still have some decent weapons on their offense, and I think that Lonzo Ball could be that difference maker. So I hope that shakes out for all of you Bulls fans out there. I hope that his return 100% helps. And then yesterday they beat the Cleveland Cavaliers 139-137, which makes their record 3-2, I believe. I believe that is the last preseason game. Again, don't really follow basketball. But on to the big one. Well, actually, we'll save the Bears for last. Let's go to the the Blackhawks, shall we? So, the Chicago Blackhawks played on Thursday night. They won 5-2, 4-2, 4-2, 3-2. I don't really remember I fell asleep like in the middle of the second period. However, there are still some good things to talk about. They are 2-2-1. They have 5 points, and they are 6th in the Central Division right now as it sits. They got St. Louis, Minnesota, Utah, Dallas, and Winnipeg ahead of them. Winnipeg is 4-0, Dallas 4-1, Utah 3-1, which, hey, good for them as a brand new team starting out. I mean, that's a pretty good start. I'll give them that. Minnesota is 2-0-2. St. Louis is 3-2, and then the Hawks right behind them, 2-2-1. However, what I do want to talk about, Connor Bedard picking up where he left off. He is all over the place. 5 games, 7 points. Same with Teravainen. I always pronounce his last name wrong. But he, 5 games, he also has 7 points. What I do like about this Hawks team this year, in just the 5 games that I have watched, they seem to be playing with a little bit more urgency. They seem to have more puck control time. And their power play kill already just seems to be miles ahead of where it was last year. It seemed like they were constantly giving up points in the power play last year, and especially in the game that I watched on Thursday night, I believe they killed 3 of the 4 power plays, and that was just through the second period up until where I fell asleep. I believe, I don't know if there was another power play or not in the third, but I know that they killed at least 3 power plays during the time that I was watching the game, and that seems already to be a lot better than where they were last year. To see Foligno get extended was very nice. I like to see him as a long-term Hawk. I think that his veteran presence helps with the younger guys like Bedard, Hall, and I just hope to see some more improvement out of the younger guys in the team, because obviously that was your big question mark going into last year. I mean, we knew that the Hawks weren't going to be good, but we were just looking at the growth of your draft picks, right? And I mean, for Connor Bedard to do what he did at 18 years old is just absolutely astronomically insane. I mean, everyone thinks that he's the next Patrick Kane, and I 100% back that. I 100% agree. I think that, I think Connor Bedard is going to be a main staple in your Blackhawks franchise. Can you match him with another Jonathan Toews type? And can you get him, some guys that are willing to go to bat for him? And by the way, there was a play that I saw by Seth Jones in the second period yesterday. It was a 3-on-1 or it was a 2-on-1. He got absolutely beat. It 100% was going to be a goal. He just laid on the ice and stuck his stick out, just trying to block, and it worked. It 100% worked. Do I like to see guys do that? No, because you could take a puck straight to the face. However, I mean, he just laid down and just dropped the stick on the ice and just hoped that he was going to block it, and it worked out. It's smart time plays like that. So I think that the Hawks are going in the right direction. Like I said, there's a game tonight, I believe 6:30, 7:30, 6:30. So I will 100% be watching that. I'll probably make a video on that game later tonight or early tomorrow morning. But I think that the the Blackhawks, as they're starting, I think that their starting point this year compared to last year, I think that they're looking a little bit stronger out of the gate than they did last year. So, just to kind of keep an eye on the growth of the Blackhawks, and we'll see how that shakes out. And then for the big time, the Chicago Bears. We got the bye week this weekend, which could not come at a better time because we had a slew of injuries going into that Jacksonville game in London. However, hats off to the Chicago Bears secondary. You guys did absolutely fantastic holding your own with a bunch of backups, especially with who was that? Kyler Gordon went out in the third quarter or fourth quarter. You guys did fantastic to hold that down. I get it. It's the Jacksonville Jaguars, but hey, you know what? They're professionals too. They get paid as professionals. And our backup secondary shut them down. Now, going into the Washington game, who's the better quarterback? I know that I'm 100% biased. I'm always going to say Caleb Williams, but I will tell you exactly why. I just so happened to be watching some breakdown podcasts this week while I was at work, and there was a very interesting point that got brought up that I would like to touch on, is that Chase Daniels at a 68.7% clip is going with his first read. That's exactly what we saw Justin Fields do. And then when his first read isn't there, he takes off. It's exactly what we saw Justin Fields do. Caleb Williams is in the bottom 5 in the league of going with his first read option. He will scan through all of his reads and sometimes come back to that first read before taking off. Now, do I agree that sometimes that can spell trouble because he takes too long? Yes, I think that sometimes he takes unnecessary sacks. But what I do like is that he puts the ball away. He doesn't try to force something like we had seen Justin Fields do in the past. So I will give him that. He is very smart with his ball protection. I do like seeing that. Do I think that Caleb Williams' deep ball is a problem for how not so accurate he's been up to this point? No, not really. I think that deep ball accuracy will come. I just would like to point out that his strong game right now is short yards and that medium range yards, up to 20-yard passes or so. That seems to be his bread and butter. And I mean, as long as you're moving the chains, you don't need to go for those deep balls. Do I think that 3rd and 1 call by Shane Waldron and how that play was set up was absolutely outstanding? Yes. Was it underthrown and intercepted? Yes. But I mean, that deep ball accuracy will come because we saw him go from overthrowing guys to underthrowing guys. So he's clearly making the adjustments. He just adjusted too far one way. So now he's just got to adjust back a little bit, find that middle ground. He'll hit them deep balls. It'll come. I think that his growth after week 3 has shown that he understands the game. He understands how to read a defense. He understands when the pocket breaks down. He understands who he can go to when he needs to throw an absolute dart in Keenan Allen. He knows when to pick up Cole Kmet when he needs the yards after contact. He knows how to pick. He knows how to see just about everything. He just needs to figure out that deep ball. And if the deep ball is the only qualm that I have with his gameplay, that's fine. And not to mention weeks 1 through 3, how much of that was even, him trying to learn? How much of it was just the play calling, right? So I mean, you can't even. Yeah, sure. You look at the box score and you're like, oh, he was terrible weeks 1 through 3. Yeah, sure. But I mean, how much of that was play calling? So, he's already got a better completion percentage than Trubisky and Fields had their entire first year. He's already got more I shouldn't say more passing yards. He's already got more passing touchdowns than they had. And I mean, we're not even halfway through the year yet. So I will say, I don't think that anybody expected the Bears to be 4-2 going into their bye. I myself expected 3-3, even though they were some pretty bad teams. Uh, I thought that what they had to figure out on the offensive line was going to take a lot longer than it did. Granted, bad defenses, bad teams. I 100% understand that, but again, they are 100% professionals and they get paid to do professional jobs. So I think that it's a good thing that your offense is figuring it out now. If the front half of your year would have been absolutely loaded with divisional games, I think the Bears offense would have been absolutely abysmal to watch, to be honest. I also think that, getting the offensive line to gel and momentum is a real thing. And if you have that going into your divisional games against Green Bay and against Minnesota and against the Lions, you very well could split that 3-3 and you could very well make the postseason. I mean, really you were looking at Tevin Jenkins to come back. He came back in Jacksonville. He did very well. And there was one more, I don't see him on the injury report here, but there was one more offensive guy you were looking at. I think it was Borum. Is who you were looking for. Because this brings up an interesting question for me is how much of the Bears' offensive line problems last year was just truly bad players and how much of it was offensive scheming and play calling. Because we saw it weeks 1 through 3, the offensive line looked terrible, but everybody agreed that the scheming and the play calling was absolutely atrocious. And then you turn that around, and now you've won 3 straight. Caleb Williams looks like, I would argue that he even looks like a veteran quarterback, the way that he stands in the pocket and throws the ball with conviction. And you're 4-2. So do I think that the offensive line needs help? Do you need a superstar on the offensive line? Absolutely. Every team needs that. I mean, no good team gets rid of good offensive linemen midseason, right? But also, when you're using these bad teams to build that, camaraderie, and you guys are gelling really good, and you guys understanding what your blocks need to be, how much can that help going to play the good teams at the tail end of the year when you got to play them, right? And not to mention, you also got 3 very winnable games ahead of that. I think that the Bears defense is better than the Commanders offense, and I think that the Bears offense is better than the Commanders defense. I say that because you saw the Washington Commanders offensive production dip the last 2 weeks, and the Bears either still went up or held steady. So I think that, you got 3 very winnable games before you go into your division play, and I think that first game against the Packers at home is 100% winnable. I think your toughest games you're going to play all year, I think the toughest game you're going to play all year is Minnesota in Minnesota. That is 100% my opinion. But even then, I think that your defense, if your defense keeps producing the way that it's producing, I think that your offense will be just good enough to either keep you in the game or maybe even win it for you. So we'll see how that goes. Now, the trade deadline's been absolutely wild. Like, Devontae Adams went to the Jets, which, if you're looking at it in hindsight, can't really say I'm surprised. He went back to play with Aaron Rodgers. Can't say I blame the guy. The Bears have been rumored to have been in talks with a couple of teams, and the most interesting one that I find is Max Crosby. I don't think there's a shot in hell that you get him. However, if you could get a Max Crosby type guy to match up with Montez Sweat on the opposite side of the football, that Bears defense is going to be unstoppable 100% of the time, because you're going to have to double up one or the other, and you're going to leave another guy wide open with a lane to the fucking quarterback. Like, there is no way that you'd be able to stop that defense. Do I think that they're getting Max Crosby? No. I'm pretty sure that the Raiders have publicly stated that they're not open to trades for the guy. But at the same time, what are you going to give up for trades? I mean, whether it's offense or defensive side of the ball, what are you willing to give up in trades at this point of the year? Because I can't see you wanting to give up draft capital because Poles has done so well in the draft in his first 3 years. I really think that the only complete dud out of the draft that we've seen is Velus Jones. And, you know, if you're looking at a Max Crosby type of guy, you're looking at having to give up a second round and probably both of your third round picks, and I would not be okay with that. I think that because I believe both Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker both came out of like the third round or later, and those guys are absolute monsters, right? So, and I would even argue same for Tyreek Stevenson. So, I don't think you give up that draft capital. I think that you keep that draft capital because Poles has shown to just have an intuition that a lot of people just apparently don't have because he can get late draft picks and it just works out for him. If you're going to pull off a trade like that, package up a couple of players, I would package Velus Jones and Khalil Herbert and then maybe a third round pick to go get a guy like Crosby if you could. You can also add Nate Davis to that trade package. That contract looks absolutely terrible. I don't know how he could be that bad and then be completely inactive in London. That contract showed that he was a very good veteran that got paid a good amount of money to come here and play football, and now he's sitting inactive. Like, that is the only miss, maybe outside of Chase Claypool, that we have seen out of Ryan Poles, which also says a lot about him. He finds a lot of good people and rarely finds a bad one, but this one was a bad one. Like, I would package those three into a deal, being Davis, Herbert, and Velus Jones. I would package all three of them in a trade yesterday. But on the flip side of that argument, do you really want to get rid of Herbert? Because if DeAndre Swift goes down with an injury, you're going to want Khalil Herbert because they have a similar play style. You're going to want him. Or if Roshan Johnson goes down for an injury for that matter, you definitely want Khalil Herbert as a backup because he's already been in the system. He's been with the Bears since he got drafted. You would want him to stay around in case of an injury. But at the same time, I also feel like the way that the Bears' run game is playing, you could plug somebody in at running back if you absolutely had to, or fullback if you had to, just to get by for a week or two when someone's out with injury. So, which again goes back to Shane Waldron's scheming and play calling the last couple of weeks. I mean, let's be honest. At the end of the year, Khalil Herbert, his time in Chicago is done. He's in a contract year. He's going to be a free agent. I don't see the Bears bringing him back. If the Bears had the option, they'll probably re-sign Swift to either another year or a long-term deal. I think that's how that's going to go down. But yeah, with the Bears being in the bye week, it only helps them because the Commanders, I mean, I know that they play Carolina this week. I think it would be absolutely hilarious if Carolina beat them. Do I see that as being realistic? No. However, one can wish. So yeah, that would be this week's Chicago Bears, Chicago Blackhawks, Chicago Cubs, and Chicago Bulls news. Hopefully the seasons keep going up and up for all teams involved. Like I said, I think the Bears made a serious turnaround. I think the Blackhawks started quite a bit stronger than they did last season. And I think that the Chicago Bulls getting Lonzo Ball back is going to be a huge help for their offensive production. So with that being said, that is this week's Chicago Sports News. We will see you next weekend.